Live here in the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner. Today, I am super excited to have Carlie Walker on the show with me. She has a brand new book, and today is release day for The Takedown. And what a fun book this is, Carlie. It's it's a bit of a holiday book, but it is a holiday book, but it doesn't. It's so much more than that. I kept trying to kind of pin down how I would classify this book. It's kind of a rom com, and it's kind of a holiday book, and there's some mystery elements to it, and there's a lot of levity, not slapstick comedy per se, but there's a lot of fun to this book. And which bucket would I put this book in? I don't know, but I love it no matter what it is. So anyway, The Takedown, today is release day for it. It's available everywhere. Carlie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And I think exactly what you said is right. I'm getting a lot of early reviewers saying that if you think that Die Hard is a Christmas movie, then The Takedown is for you. Or if you think that the movie
Right.
with Keanu Reeves is actually a romance, then The Takedown is for you. So I I just took all of the genres that I love and just decided to mash them all together and see what happens. And I love Christmas. I love spy stories. I love romance. And I thought, what would happen if I just sprinkled everything in? And the result is The
Yeah, if you
Takedown.
just put it all in,
Yeah.
and it absolutely works. Um, I love to start with a fun question just to kind of break the ice and to kind of set the tone for the show. And one question that I love asking people is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh gosh. So I went to a Montessori school and it was really, really great for things like they encouraged our passions. And I was able to just sit down and we had journaling every day and they just
Yeah.
allowed us to create and just write whatever we wanted to write. And those were some of my first memories of just sitting in my, first grade classroom in my beanbag chair and with my little composition notebook and I used to write about my animals a lot. So although this is my debut adult novel, I've written many novels for children, and they were all about animals. So I used to write about animals all the time, of like what my dog was doing. And so I think the first book I ever wrote was about my dog Sally catching bees and how painful that was. So not really a great narrative there, or like a moral lesson, but I really enjoyed that.
And your work as a children's author slash middle grade slash YA author, you published under Carly Sorosiak, is that right?
I did. Yes. So I wanted to make sure that I had this division between my adult
Yeah.
books and my books for kids because there are some spicier scenes in The Takedown. And, as a soon to be mother myself, I was thinking I wouldn't really want my child like transitioning from a picture book to something that a little bit spicier. So I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure
Yeah.
the division was very clear. And it also gave me an opportunity to just do some different things. As I said, I mostly write about animals in my middle grade and picture books, and this is very different. Although there is a dog in it in The Takedown, I
There
had to,
is.
I had to incorporate that. Her name is Sweetie Pie, and she's a very very good girl. Um, and you have to have a dog in a Christmas book, so it's another thing. I
Of
just
course you do. That's one of the tropes that you have to
Mhm.
tick off. When you're going through your list, it's got to be a dog. How did you get started writing children's books? It was being an author always your career path, or most people there's kind of a circuitous route that they go to, to find writing.
Oh, I took the long road. So I started
That's the
off
fun
in
road usually.
Yes. I started off in a major called Peace, War, and Defense at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I wanted to be an analyst or a case officer for the CIA. And when that recruitment process actually started happening, I thought to myself, maybe I don't actually want to do this. It seems kind of scary and I have anxiety. Maybe I should be a children's author instead. I did a very hard U-turn into a completely different direction. But that was my original goal. Either that or being like a conflict negotiator or something to do with defense strategy. So I still have a lot of friends who went that route, and I went the other way. And when I got to graduate school, it was for English and American Studies, and I was able to get an internship at a really lovely London publisher called Faber and Faber in the children's department. And it just really inspired me to write that first YA book and to get that out there. And I just had an opportunity to work with a lot of amazing authors. And it's just such a fun space to be in, much like the rom-com space. Rom-coms are, it's got that similar joyous vibe.
Yeah. And a great community has kind of grown up around publishing and everyone involved in the process. It's really interesting to see these communities that grow up around certain genres, and everywhere from the agents to the publicists, kind of, and everyone in between in the process.
Yeah.
People that love books are fascinating people for sure.
Absolutely. And the book talk community and the bookstagram
Oh yeah.
community and just the passion that comes from these readers. I mean, I'm super appreciative whenever anyone even reads my book, but posting about it on top of that. And they have these beautiful pictures and these beautiful reels. And I'm just, I did one reel today where I was dancing and I just felt so awkward about it. And they can just do that. So
Right.
props to them.
Right, exactly. I I had no idea about your history with the CIA, and that little nugget of information that you brought up a minute ago makes so much sense now after reading the Takedown, because
Yeah.
that's a bit of a subplot in the Takedown.
It is.
So how did well first off, and I have so many questions I want to ask you because you've got this great Substack that you started, and you've got about 3 articles up so far. But one of them, you talked about the process of going from writing your children's novels to now publishing this more adult rom com, and kind of the process that you went through of finding your writing voice, if you will, and some things that you used to expand your palette. One of those was Jessica Brody's book. What was it that because you talked about the transformation that your writing took when doing that? How would you describe your natural kind of your natural gift of writing versus where you are now with the way that you have honed your craft and added
Yeah.
to your toolkit and expanded your God-given talent, if you will?
Thank you. Well, I started out with just vibes, just like atmosphere and just the
Yeah.
feeling of the book. And it turns out when you start writing and you're just doing vibes, the plot suffers because there isn't one. And it took me till actually my middle grade books when I picked up Jessica Brody's Save the Cat Writes novel, and then really, really dove into it for the takedown of actually thinking about to like even percentage points of like at 25% in the novel that happens, this is the midpoint. And I think that the midpoint in the novel where the midpoint twist actually happened within like 15 words of the word tracker. And it makes it so much punchier and it makes things make sense and it makes the editing easier. And I think that there's this stigma. And I think that she even calls it like the F word, which is formula, that we don't
Right.
really to confine ourselves into this space. But
Yeah.
actually, I found that once I started relying on that formula, which is just the basis of all good stories. I mean, like Joseph Campbell, The Hero's Journey, every story is kind of has these right? And if we are relying on them, it actually gives us a lot more room for creativity and a lot more space to play, because I don't have to use that part of my brain thinking like, oh gosh, like, what comes next again? I know what comes next. It's supposed to be the bad guys are closing in, or it's supposed to be the dark night of the soul, or and it's really opened up this window for me, and people like my books a lot better because they have plot to them. So yes,
I,
plot is helpful. Plot,
I,
although
I
I
think
still
it.
love the vibes, but having a plot too on top
You
of
can have both. It's not either or. You can have a structure and bring all of the things that you love about a story to it. That's something that new writers, especially, I think, struggle with is we think it's some mystical art form, and you either have the gift or you don't, and it's there we love to dramatize the writing process, and it's writer's tears, and all of this kind of stuff, and it's just like a carpenter who builds really elaborate furniture. You have to practice, and if you understand math and things like that behind your craft, it just makes you that much more of a creative person. It doesn't detract from it. I think that's a hurdle that a lot of new writers really
yeah.
struggle with climbing over, is the thinking that I'm going to sacrifice my art, if I learn some mechanics.
Right. And you really do not have to reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah.
Again, I think just like starting with the Epic of Gilgamesh, like it's all pretty much the same, but different, different uh kind of like stuffing in between
Yeah.
those and in those beats. And one thing you just said, where with the writer's tears, which is something I always want to talk about with the takedown, is this has been the most joyous experience I've ever had writing a book. And it has been so far my most successful experience, just based on the way it sold and the auction. And that was really eye-opening to me as well, that you didn't have to suffer when you were
Yeah.
writing. You actually have on Christmas music and Christmas lights in the background and just be laughing throughout the process and enjoy yourself. And that was not something that I had experienced in the same way with any of my
Yeah.
other books, which are still, like funny books, but I really struggled through them. And the takedown, it was written so quickly, and I just had a lot of fun. So, and I think that also transfers into it.
It
But yeah, so
it
formula
does.
fun equals fun plotty book
Yeah. And
instead.
it does translate to the page, because that joy that you're experiencing in the writing definitely seeps through your fingers, or whatever it is when you're holding it, but it definitely transfers to the reader for sure. Was the Takedown the first adult novel that you had written, or had you tried this process before and it was just painful?
I tried to write an adult novel before graduate school. And
Okay.
looking back at that book, oh my gosh, was it bad? It was some sort of dystopian thing, like set in Oxford. And again, the plot was not there. And I didn't really know where I was going with it. I just, kind of liked the title, and I liked, again, the atmosphere, the setting. But this was my first, I would say, actual attempt at it,
Yeah.
where I knew that when I told myself, so I'm 33 now, I told myself that when I hit 30, that I was going to really try to start writing an adult book, because I was like a proper adult. Now, when I was in my late 20s, I felt like an adult, but not like fully an adult. But now that I was
Right.
fully, I was going to write an adult novel. And sorry, pregnancy brain. I don't remember the beginning of this question. I'm very pregnant, but
W-
yeah,
I was
that's where
just
I'm going.
asking about, was this the first adult book that you had tried? But
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that, I'm glad you brought that up, because I I love to read all sorts of genres, and I love fantasy. I love the Lord of the Rings. I've got collector's editions, but I can't write fantasy, and I've tried over and over again, and it's just it's just not where I land. I write more lighthearted, more like cozy mystery. And
Right.
and I love that genre as well, but that's what I really gravitate toward. And I think finding your writer voice is crucial because you can love to read all sorts of genres, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be the best at
Yeah.
writing that. You know,
Yeah.
so was there a journey toward finding your ideal writing voice, your place in where you fit in the scope of genre?
Yeah, I think that for me across all of my books, that humor has been the connector. And I didn't really
Yeah.
realize that I was funny until people started telling me that I was funny. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'm funny. And so every single book that I've written really has this basis in humor. And I totally agree with what you're saying. I'd always wanted to write a fantasy novel because I love reading fantasy books, and those are the books that I grew
Yeah.
up with as a kid. So actually, I pitched one for like a middle grade book, and they bought it on a synopsis, and then it took me 3.5 years to write it because it turns out it's fantasy is really hard.
It is
With the
very hard. Yeah.
yes, and with the takedown, the thing that I found the relationships between the characters quite easy. The like almost slapstick humor that you were talking about. In the original draft of the takedown, my agents came back to me and said, there's this crime element, but basically you've just made the bad guys bad because they're bad and they have a bad vibe.
Right.
Like, what have you done? What's their crime? So that didn't really come naturally to me. So that had to be teased out. But I think that in all genres, it's just about practice. If I had to
Yeah.
write a second fantasy novel now, I think I'd be much better at it because I
Yeah.
had 3 years of drafting. And the same with, adult book too, which I just turned in for the drafting process. I feel like the crime element of it is a lot stronger than my first draft of the takedown. And especially when you get into publishing and you have just so much help. Like, it really takes a village. I have an agent on either side of the pond because I moved from London. So my main agent is in London and I have a second agent in New York. Both of them read the books. I have 2 editors who also do the same thing. And by the end of it, you have this thing that you never could have created by yourself. And the same with
Right.
beta readers and all of your writer friends, and just finding that community that's really going to help you, especially when you want to start exploring new genres.
Yeah. Speaking of character motivation, bad guys that are bad for other reasons than just twirling mustaches.
Right.
You can make them mustache twirling, evil villains, but just because you give them a mustache doesn't make them evil. Um, are there exercises that you do or ways that you kind of explore characters to find their motivation or to kind of figure out what would drive a person to want to join the CIA, or what would drive a person to want to commit this crime? Have you developed things that to help discover those characters?
Yeah, I do a lot of journaling. And I also think about a lot of characters that I've seen in movies and TV shows that are more than this one-dimensional mustache twirling character. And again, this is
Yeah.
something that my agent with of like, so Johnny in the takedown he's a little bit mustache twirling, but in like a frat boy, like
Yeah.
waspy sort of way. But still he has this, really intense like familial obligation. And my agent Claire had recommended that I just watch some clips of The Sopranos and really give that kind of vibe of a big family and what it means to
Right.
have a family obligation and how you can get kind of wrapped up and sucked into that. And again, no spoilers, but you kind of don't really know if Johnny's like a bad person. You don't know if Nick's a bad person. And even the term bad person isn't like, no one's really, well, I guess there are
Right.
bad people, but it's, it's more shades of gray than that.
Yeah.
Um,
What's
yeah.
It's bad person versus a person who does bad things, and
Yes.
in that you can find motivation. You can and maybe he's just a spoiled brat and doesn't
Yeah.
understand consequences. I mean, that is a motivation.
Yep.
You know, but yeah, it's fun to kind of explore where these people come from and why they
Yeah.
do the things they do.
And I think depending on the genre too, you can go much, much deeper because this is a rom com. He was not
Right.
going to be like super evil. He's going to be like evil in like a Ralph Lauren
Yeah.
catalog sort of way. But
$1 billion. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Um, talk to me about Sydney Swift. And uh, one question I have: how much Taylor Swift were you listening to when you wrote this character?
I was listening to a lot of Taylor Swift, and I kept waiting for someone to be like, "You can't call her Sydney Swift. Like, you can't do this." And then no one did throughout the entire process. So now that's in the book, and there's some Taylor Swift references, and I loved the song "Tis the Damn Season" and all of her like Christmassy songs. So, um, Sydney is in some ways my alter ego. I always put a little bit of myself in my characters, even if they're like a golden retriever. And Sydney is kind of who I thought I might have become if I had
Mm,
stuck with the peace, war, and defense route and I'd stuck with the CIA route and really just leaned into like intelligence operations.
yeah.
And how my life might have how my life might have gone. So obviously, maybe not with the donkey costume, the crime lord, and the sister, and all of that, but just trying to negotiate family and romantic relationships and how difficult that is as someone who keeps secrets for a living.
Gotcha. Um, when you discovered the process that kind of unlocked writing for you, did w- what comes first for you? I'm the thing that I'm fascinated with the most is the moment of creation. You know, people ask all the time, where do you get ideas from? And I hate that question because ideas are everywhere. But what I do find fascinating is that either you're watching a news article and you start playing the what if game, or maybe you're just minding your own business and a character walks onto the stage of your mind and you're like, well, who are you and what are you up to? And, and then the wheels start turning. So at some point, the takedown did not exist whatsoever. And then one of these moments happened. Something happened, and then it did exist. And you, as the writer, your job then was to dig this thing up and excavate it and dust it off and edit it. And then it became the book that it is now. So, what was that first moment of creation for you?
This is a long story, so I'm going to try to
I'm
get
here
through
for
it without too many details. But as I said, when I turned 30 years old, I really just wanted to write an adult novel. And I was a professor at the time, and I just wasn't, it was during COVID time, and like I just wasn't
it.
satisfied with teaching. And I told myself, you know what, I'm just gonna quit my job and I'm just gonna write this book. Except I didn't have any ideas. And around Christmas time, I started to panic. And I had read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, where she
Yeah.
talked about the ideas are just like floating entities in the universe, and all you have to do is just request an idea and an idea will come to you. And I just thought that is some woo woo hippie nonsense, but I'm going to try it. And I
Yeah.
want to try it earnestly. And so I was driving in my car and I was on the way to CrossFit because I'm like a huge CrossFitter. I love like stories about strong women and lifting and
Oh yeah.
everything. And I was thinking about that. And I just said, universe, I'm ready. Like, whatever story you want to give me right now, in whatever genre, I swear to you, I will write it. And I didn't have any kind of genre requirements. It was like, whatever you give me, I promise I will write it. It was 3 minutes later that the entire narrative for the takedown just dropped in my head. I had the full
Oh
scene
wow.
for full first scene of Calla, Johnny, Nick, Sydney at the dining table, Christmas Eve. That whole first scene, the premise, all the characters, main setting. I'm getting chills. Like it really just dropped in my lap, and my first thought was like, oh God, not that. Like that's way too complicated. There are way too many genres in that. But I had promised whoever or whatever that I was going to write
Yeah.
this book. And I did. And that's the
Wow.
story of the tale. Yeah. That has never happened to me
Namaste.
before.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll ever happen again. But if you were out there and you want to give it a try, just earnestly request from the universe that a story be dropped in your lap and see what happens. So
Wow. Wow. So
yeah.
did you then start sketching out, what
I
you had
did. I
seen
put it on the
and
side of the road. I immediately emailed my agent. And I said, "How do you feel about Christmas books?" And I said, and then I sent her a follow up email saying, "I hope you really like Christmas books because I have one." And she sent back like 15 minutes later, "I love Christmas books. Send me a pitch." And I sent her a pitch in January, when I had all of the first pages
yeah.
complete, and we sent those out to U.S. agents because she wanted to get a U.S. agent on board as well, just right at the beginning for that kind of story development, and then the rest is history. Yeah, so
Wow.
I started right away.
So would this have been last year?
This
Last
was, oh gosh,
January?
I'm really bad with dates, so it would have been, I think it would have been 2 years ago, 2 Januaries ago,
Okay. Gotcha.
because it took a little while through the submission process, and then although it was purchased pretty quickly, but we had to do the edits and all of that. So I did
Yeah.
a few rounds with my agent, before we went out on submission, just to make sure it was as polished as possible. And that was something that I've also never really gone through before, because usually I sell a book on just a synopsis, instead of writing the full thing. So it was exciting.
Well, I know most nonfiction books are sold that way with a synopsis, and you sell the idea more or less, and it's definitely more than just an idea. There's a lot of work that goes into fleshing out a whole synopsis and all that. Are children's books similar to that? I
So
wasn't aware that it was.
with the children's books, I've been working for a while with a really wonderful publisher in the UK called Nosy Crow, that just seems to trust that I know how to write books, and it does well. So I've just been selling books to them, and once I had my first one, they were just buying it based on a synopsis after that. So
Gotcha. And
yeah.
and so when you told your agent I have this idea for a Christmas book,
Mm.
what did you guys do to gauge the interest before, because when you're writing fiction, a lot of times you write an entire novel and you invest, the better part of a year a lot of times into this book, not knowing
Yeah.
if anyone cares, about it. You do all the work up front. Um, is that the way this book came about, or did your agent have a way to kind of gauge interest before you did all this work? How did that happen for you?
So Claire is wonderfully, she has her finger really on the pulse of the industry and what editors are looking for, and the same with Pete Knapp, my agent in New York. And I think that we talked about comp titles, so comparison titles of what would this book be like and what did it feel like, and it felt a little bit like Miss Congeniality meets like a more kind of sexier rom com. And we were pretty certain that people were going to like that based on what was selling and what Book Talk was interested in. So it wasn't like we went out to publishers and said, "Would you be interested in this book?" It was more of just this general sense that this is what's selling in the market right now, and they use tools like BookScan, to see how many books are being purchased and what categories and genres. So I was pretty confident, and she was pretty confident that it was going to land somewhere.
So not only working on your story structure skills, but understanding the market as well.
Uh,
Just to know, if I write this book, is there any interest at all with readers?
yeah,
That is, that's another, kind of pulling the curtain back on being a professional writer. Is, it doesn't sound all woo woo and sexy, and all of the artsy, that it's an industry, and we need to know if someone's going to be there to buy it if we produce it.
yeah. Yeah. I think also, it's half that, but also if you are creating a book and you are just so passionate about it and it really
Yeah.
makes you smile and makes your heart beat faster, there is someone out there who is also going to have that same reaction. So the amount of
Right.
effort and love that you're pouring into a book is going to be reflected back to you and your readers. So I never like to say, make sure you look at the market and what's selling. I mean, obviously, don't write like a 200,000 word middle grade book.
Yeah.
But
Right.
at the same time,
Yeah.
don't pigeonhole yourself into, okay, well, this is selling. Because if I had done that, I wouldn't have written like a female spy Christmas book because
Yeah.
there was no
Right.
competition for that. And I think that that's something that publishers also really were attracted to. As I said, I've never had as much initial interest in a book than I had during this submission. I think it went to an 8-house auction in the US, and a 5-house auction in the UK, which I'd never even had
So
like more than one
wild.
interested in my work before. And I think that was because it was a mix of so many different genres, and it was something that was like a little bit more unique in the rom-com space.
Yeah.
And the rom-com space is already doing so much. Like there's already it's a great space to be in.
Yeah.
So a mix of the two, keeping your eye on the market, but not letting the market dictate exactly what you want to do, letting your passion do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have to ask you this, Carlie. Is this the last time that we'll see Sydney Swift and company? Or, if people love this book, can there be more?
I mean, I'm very open to writing more. I think we're just going to see how the first one does. I just submitted
Yeah.
a second book, which is another standalone. There is one character who does reappear, and that's Gail, who is the kind of FBI boss. If she recruits like another person for another mission, but it's very, very different than the Takedown. It's actually more of a summer book, and it's in Italy and has some assassins in it. So we'll see how it goes. But I never say never, and I again really loved writing these characters. And that was a discussion that we had up front of should it be Kella's story next, who's the sister in the Takedown, and maybe we'll see how it goes.
Maybe. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. Well, the takedown is available everywhere today, and you can go visit your local bookstore and pick it up, or we'll put links to it to the Amazon page if you don't have a great local bookstore to visit. It is October 3rd today, so it is available everywhere. Go grab it. Carlie, if people are just discovering you and they buy the book and they love it and they want to follow along with news coming up, where's the best place for people to find you online to
Oh, yeah.
keep in touch?
So I'm pretty active on Instagram at Carlie Walker author, and also carliewalker.com, but I'm not a tech person, so that'll just be
Yeah.
the same. But yeah, as a contact form, so you can contact me and
Yeah.
I'll contact you
And you're blogging over at Substack now.
at
So
Substack.
we'll
Yes.
drop that in as well to make it easy for folks to find you. Carlie, it's been so much fun chatting. We're going to send everyone to pick up their copy of The Takedown. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. This was lovely.